Internal Revenue Service IRS Tax News. Security Summit. Tax pros can help clients battle identity theft risk related to unemployment. IR 2021-163, August 3rd, 2021, Washington. The Internal Revenue Service Security Summit. Partners today outlined for tax professionals how they can assist clients who were victims of unemployment compensation fraud schemes that targeted state workforce agencies in 2020 and 2021. Obviously, there was a pandemic-related downturn during this time period, which would subject more people to have the ability, possibly, to sign up for unemployment benefits. Now, that also increases the likelihood or demand of other people, criminals, thefts, to try to engage in identity theft, to steal people's identity and try to claim the unemployment on their behalf, collecting the checks themselves. In other words, if you have an individual that could be subject or able to claim unemployment and they don't, and somebody else has their information, such as social security number and work information, and they file for unemployment to the state using this other person's identity, then possibly they can get the unemployment checks, and the one that actually should have been receiving the unemployment checks if they had signed up for it would not be getting the unemployment checks in that case. The IRS is saying there's been a lot more of that going on during this time period, which again you would kind of expect given the fact that there's a lot more opportunity for that kind of identity theft to be taking place. When it comes to light, it usually happens at the end of the year because unemployment is something that should be reported normally on the tax return as income, something that would generally be taxable, although they made an exception in 2020. And so you would get a 1099 from the government saying, hey, you got unemployment money, unemployment compensation, you need to report it on your taxes for the federal income taxes. And if you got a 1099 from the state saying that you received unemployment wages and you say, hey, wait a second, I didn't get unemployment wages, then that would be the indication that, of course, someone else got the unemployment wages that you should have got if you had filed because someone else stole your identity and filled out the return for you or filled out the process to get the unemployment. So then the question is, well, what do you do at that point in time if I now have a 1099 indicated that I got unemployment compensation and I didn't get the unemployment compensation, and clearly what must have happened, you would think then, is someone else stole my identity and they got the unemployment compensation, and now they think that I got it, and they think that I should be reporting it on the taxes. So generally, from what you want to do is talk to the state on that and try to get the 1099 generally to be adjusted or fixed for it. Now, it might not have as impact on the federal income tax return for the year that you would be filing it as it otherwise would, because the IRS has exempted a substantial amount of the unemployment income as income, which may or may not have been related to this as to what their thought process was for why they did it. So you may not have to have a tax impact on it anyways, because it might have been exempt from the tax impact in 2020, but you'd still think that it would be wise to go to the state and say, hey, look, I didn't get the unemployment. Your 1099 is wrong. I'd like you to basically reissue the 1099, see if there was identity theft, inform them of that so they can basically go after the identity thieves. And then you want to say, well, what can they do now? Because obviously my information is out there, because they must have had my social security number and name and address or something like that in order to fill out the unemployment. What do I do now to safeguard myself now that my information has been stolen? One thing you might end up doing is trying to say, well, the next thing they could do is try to file a federal income tax return on your behalf, stealing your identity in that case, because there's a huge incentive to do so, because they got all these refundable credits that are going out right now, like the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit and the advanced child tax credit and these types of things. So that increases, again, the demand for identity theft could go up greatly just to file tax returns fraudulently on someone's behalf. So that's one area where you could try to safeguard yourself from having problems in the future. Okay, so that's the background. The IRS state tax agencies and tax industry working together as the Security Summit. The Security Summit has a link here. The Security Summit has joined together to thwart evil. Back to the text here. Reporting that unemployment compensation fraud was one of the more common identity theft schemes that emerged in 2020 as criminals exploited the COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting academic impact. Addressing unemployment compensation fraud is the third in a 5-part series sponsored by the Summit Partners to highlight critical steps tax professionals can take to protect client data. This year's income theme, quote, boost security immunity, fight against identity theft, end quote. There's a link to that theme here, is an effort to urge tax professionals to try harder to secure their system and protect client data during the pandemic and its aftermath. Quote, identity thieves always look for opportunities, and the unemployment surge presented a new opportunity to exploit the pain and financial hardships faced by Americans, end quote, said IRS Commissioner Chuck Rettig. Quote, this particular scam is especially egregious because 23 million Americans were jobless or unemployed last year and desperately needed these benefits, end quote. The U.S. So obviously that's kind of the way it is. Anytime there's more benefits going from the government, the scammers, increase, the demand for scamming goes up. So in any case, the U.S. Department of Labor's Inspector General estimated approximately $89 billion in unemployment compensation was lost in $89 billion in unemployment compensation was lost in 2020 due to fraud. Wow. Unemployment compensation is taxable income on federal taxes, although Congress waived the tax for 2020 for many people. State report compensation to the individual and to the IRS by using the Form 1099-G. So that 1099-G would be the indication that you got unemployment income. And if you didn't get the unemployment income, then that would where most people would say, hey, maybe someone stole my identity. And that's when you say, well, what should I do? What do I do at that point? So because of fraud and identity theft, many taxpayers receive Forms 1099-G for compensation they did not receive. Some taxpayers receive forms from multiple states. So this scam could affect 2021 returns next year as well as 2020 returns this year. So here are a few steps tax professionals should take to assist clients who are victims of the unemployment compensation fraud scheme. So we're in a situation where imagining you're a tax professional or you are the taxpayer who got this 1099-G. You didn't actually get the unemployment. You're saying, oh no, someone stole my identity. What do we do at this point in time? Number one, file a Form 14039 identity theft affidavit. There's a link to that only if an e-file tax return rejects because of the client's social security number has already been used. So this one, Form 14039 identity theft affidavit, notice that has to do with the federal income taxes. So I believe that you only use that one if they have actively also used your identification number, not only to steal your social security, to steal your information for unemployment, but then used it to file a tax return fraudulently on your behalf, possibly to pick up some of these big refundable credit type things that are going out. So if they had already used your identity again to try to steal from the IRS in essence by filing your tax return, and you would know that by the fact that when you tried to file your tax return, it bounced back because the IRS is saying, meaning if you filed electronically, it would have bounced back and not going through because the IRS would have already had someone file a tax return using that social security and number. Then I believe that's when you use the Form 14039 identity theft affidavit. If you got a 1099-G and they stole your identity and they stole unemployment compensation, but they have not yet used that identity number to try to file a fraudulent tax return on your behalf, then I don't think you use this one. I think you take separate action. That's how I interpret this. So do not file the IRS Form 14039 to report unemployment compensation fraud to the IRS. So 2, report the fraud to state workforce agencies and request a corrected Form 1099-G. Now, note that this is the case with any kind of 1099. If someone 1099s you, gives you a 1099, they also gave it to the IRS. And if that 1099 is wrong, then the IRS has wrong information. And if you fill out your tax return properly, which you want to do, meaning you don't include the amount that was on the 1099, you will almost inevitably get a letter from the IRS saying, hey, look, we got this income, saying that this third party says you got this money, in this case the state, and you're saying that you didn't get it. We have an issue there, and we would like to resolve it. You're going to have to deal with it. So the best way to do it is to go to the person that issued the 1099, which in this case is the state, and say, look, your 1099 is wrong. I didn't get that money. I want you to correct it. Give me a new 1099 or reject the 1099 and send something to the IRS telling them I shouldn't have got that 1099 so that when I file my tax return properly, reporting the proper income, not including this unemployment compensation, I won't get a letter saying that I didn't include something that I got a 1099 for. So that's your first step. You got to go to the source of the 1099. You can't go to the government, you can't go to the Fed, you can't go to the IRS because they don't know what to do. They're just going to say I got the 1099 from the state generally, or whoever gave me the 1099. You got to get it fixed from the person that issued the 1099, in this case the state. So each state has its own process for reporting unemployment compensation fraud. The U.S. Department of Labor has created an information page with all state contacts and other information at dol.gov/fraud. There's a link to that information page here. Number 3, file a tax return reporting only the actual income received. So you don't want to report any income that you haven't received, even if you got a 1099 for it, if it's wrong, because you want to report your tax return factually and honestly. Now, remember, if you report your tax return factually and honestly, not including the income that was reported on the 1099-G because you didn't get it, but you couldn't get it revoked or fixed from the state, then you might have to say that you're going to deal with it from the IRS, meaning it could hold up your return because the IRS is going to say, I got a 1099 that you didn't report on it. They might send you a letter, and you're going to have to do some back and forth work with the IRS and say, hey, look, I know, but that thing was wrong. And this is why, and that's what's going to happen. That's why it's best to get it fixed on the state side as soon as you can, but still file your tax return correctly. And if you didn't get the income, you don't report the income. So state workforce agencies may not be able to timely issue a corrected Form 1099-G, even if the client has not received a corrected Form 1099-G. Report only wages and income received and exclude any fraudulent claims. So you're not gonna include the income just because the 1099 says it if it's wrong, because you're working on fixing it, and so you're gonna report it the way you think it should be reported. So number 4, consider an IRS identity protection PIN. So the next step is, well, what do I do about these people? These people have my information out there. These nefarious folks have my social security number apparently. What do I do now? Well, the next one thing you could do is protect them from the next obvious thing that they could use to try to scam money from the government, and that would be to file a tax return on your behalf and take advantage of all these fairly large refundable tax credits that are out there. And so to do that, you can file for a PIN, which is kind of like a second social security number, at least for filing tax returns, and it's much more secure because they actually update it on a yearly basis, as opposed to your social security number that you've had since you were a small child and you were trying to memorize it when you were like 5, and you did so by repeating it to anybody that was there so that you could help practice, and then you gave it to every institution that you've ever done any financial business with until, you're 45 or something like that. So, your social security number could quite well be compromised at this point in time. It would be nice if you had a number that kind of changed. That would be more secure, you would think. And for the tax return with the IRS, that would be the social security number or the PIN number, the IRS identification number. So clients receiving Form 1099-G are identity theft victims whose personal information could be used for additional criminal activities, such as filing a fraudulent tax return. All taxpayers who can verify their identity can now obtain an identity protection PIN to protect their SSNs. An identity protection PIN to protect their SSNs, which is their social security number. Read more about the IPPINs at irs.gov/IPPIN. There's a link to that here. And then number 5, follow Federal Trade Commission recommendations for identity theft victims. Taxpayers should consider steps to protect their credit and other actions outlined by the FTC. So you can go to the FTC and look at what else they suggest outside of your taxes to deal with the fact that someone has stolen, some nefarious folks have stolen the identity. The DOL also includes this information on its dol.gov/fraud page. There's a link to that here. Number 6, finally, tax professionals' business clients can also assist in fighting unemployment compensation fraud by responding quickly to state notices about employees filing jobless claims, especially when it has no record of these employees. Although the unemployment compensation is taxable, the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 allows an exclusion of unemployment compensation up to $10,200 for individuals for taxable year 2020. So even if you got the 1099, it might not have that much effect on 2020 at least. We'll see what they do on 2021 because they may have excluded it from the income. And again, that might not have been related to why they did that, but in any case, it is what it is. So in the case of married individuals filing joint Form 1040 or Form 1040 SR, this exclusion is up to $10,200 per spouse. To qualify for this exclusion, adjusted gross income, the AGI, must be less than $150,000. This threshold applies to all filing statuses. The exclusion may ease the burden on many fraud victims. However, victims who receive Form 1099-G from multiple states may have fraud claims that exceed that exclusion amount. Clients should retain any records of fraud reports to state. So additional resources, tax professionals can also get help with security recommendations by reviewing recently revised IRS Publication 4557, Safeguarding Tax Data. So it's recently revised here. So if you've read that excellent document before, you might want to check it out again. There's a link to that here. There's also a Small Business Information Security, the Fundamentals, by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, the IRS Identity Theft Criminal Page, Central Page, Identity Theft Central Page. There's a link to that here for tax pros, individuals, and businesses. Have important details as well. Publication 5293, Data Security Rescue Guide for Tax Professionals, is also available here. It provides a compilation of data theft information available on irs.gov. Also, tax professionals should stay connected to the IRS through subscriptions to e-news for tax professionals and social media. Remember to follow the IRS on social meds. It's, that's where all the good information's at. All the cool people are there. So for more information, see Boost Security Immunity Fight Against Identity Theft. There's links to that information here. There'll be a link to this in the description.